On.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rick True, and I serve Calvin University as the Director of Alumni and Parent Relations. And we're glad to have you here for another Calvin Chat. And we're excited to have with us Scott Van Deraa today. He's from Creative Dining Services, and Creative Dining Services partners with Calvin University to supply all the catering needs at the university for faculty, staff, and students, and for guests coming to campus as well. So we're excited to have Scott with us today. I know that there have been a lot of questions about how food is delivered in the middle of a pandemic. And so we thought, well, let's just bring the expert on and talk to him and let him answer all these questions face to face for you today. So we've got a bunch of questions that we've received ahead of time that we're going to just start out with. And then we will also open it up, if we have some time at the end, for questions from parents who are tuning in right now. You can put those questions in the comments below. But to get started, I will let Scott go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work at Calvin and how long you've been there.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to meet with everybody and to kind of talk about the things we've been doing. This is my second fall at Calvin. I've been with Creative Dining Services for almost 20 years. Prior to this, I was at Davenport for 10 years. As with everyone else, this is not the fall that I envisioned, but this is the way life goes. I've been working in food services since I was 16. I'm actually a Laker alum, so Grand Valley State University. And I worked in food services while I was a student there as well. So I've been on both sides from a student employee standpoint and now as a manager. This fall has been very challenging. There's been a lot of things that we've planned and replanned and dumped and planned again. And there's been a lot of restrictions and guidelines that have been provided to us by state departments, health department, the country as well, that we're trying to work within while still providing the best service and healthy food for our students. So.
Yeah, that's great. So you brought up the Kent County Health Department, and I know they have some different restrictions for Calvin as a residential community, as opposed to like restaurants that are in the Greater Grand Rapids area here. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your work with the Kent County Health Department and our dining operations. Can you sort of give us a brief summary of where we've been and where we're going to be going?
Sure. We have a pretty constant flow of communication with our person at the Kent County Health Department. In fact, we just had a new person assigned to us. They've expanded their staff. As you can imagine, they're quite busy. It started last spring. I don't know if spring's even right. In February, we started having conversations with the health department. Creative Dining Services helped expedite a lot of those conversations and helped us put together a COVID playbook that we presented to the health department that spoke more in general terms. But as things changed and developed, we continued to communicate with the health department in trying to figure out how best to operate during COVID. The challenge, as you alluded to, Rick, is that we are a resident community, and so it's not seen the same way as a commercial restaurant, because we have our population that is contained and living on campus, and so there's a higher opportunity for exposure as far as concentrated time together, as opposed to a restaurant where it's the word that the health department uses, transient. Guests come in and guests go out, and you have time to sanitize in between. And so they initially, at the beginning of the summer, they were quite strict. In fact, they were looking at us in the same way that you would look at a nursing home. And as you've probably heard in the media and through the news, nursing home rules are quite strict because they are a high at risk population. But through conversations and providing them with our plans and revising based on their advisement, we were able to get certain things to open up. As an example, at the beginning of the summer, they were saying no in-seat dining halls. It was 100% takeout, and that was it. And with working with them, we're allowed up to 50% capacity now in the dining halls. That includes the students waiting in line inside, but so we're able to provide some seating inside, which is great considering where the weather is going. There was a lot of give and take in regards to how sanitation needs to work, especially as the CDC was still defining and redefining what we needed to do to ensure that the COVID-19 wasn't present in our operations if somebody happened to be dining in there and be a carrier of it. So it's been a constant back and forth with them, but they're tough, but they're willing to listen and to work with us.
Yeah, that's great. And they're tough, but it's also helping, I would think, to keep the numbers down on campus. And we've been very happy to see where our COVID numbers have been as far as infections on campus and that type of thing. They're very low, and we'd love to see that continue, especially as they're increasing here in Kent County right now. I know one of the big topics that's we've been hearing about a lot from parents and from students this semester has been the lines and waiting in line. And I'm wondering what's being done about the lines, and also are there any other plans for the upcoming months as it gets a little bit colder and trying to keep people from waiting outdoors and that type of thing?
Sure. It's interesting. We've always actually had lines in the dining halls, but it wasn't as big a deal in years past because they could bunch up together, and if the rain's starting, everybody just got cozy in the walkways and tried to make sure that everyone was inside. But of course, our current rules don't allow for that. And if you take the same lines we had last year and you spread it out 6 feet apart, they get pretty long, which does put a significant amount of students outside. It is definitely our top concern right now and what we're trying to figure out. And it's tough because from the Kent County Health Department and actually the state of Michigan, their view and their way of handling things is they're proposing and suggesting and in some ways creating rules that are going to create the lowest amount of risk. And from their perspective, and this kind of goes back to that nursing home example again, the lowest rate of risk would be for students to get food and just go right back to their dorm room and eat alone. And that's unrealistic for a few reasons. Of course, mental health is a concern there. And the Kent County, the last conversation I had with them, they recognize that is a concern and something that also is part of health. The other piece of it is that students are going to find places to eat if we don't provide them. So the lines are going to continue to be a concern. We have made some recent changes in our operations based on student feedback. One of the other comments that students and parents have provided us since the start of this fall, is that students aren't getting enough food. And after having some conversations with some students, what it came down to is we were creating these from scratch entrees, which, from a culinary standpoint were quality, but from a safety or comfort standpoint was not within the students' area of comfort. And so I spoke to a hockey player, and he said, well, I committed to this meal. It looked okay. I sat down. I didn't like it. And I'm not allowed to go swap it out based on our current rules. Whereas in other years, they were much more open to trying new things because if they didn't like it, they could just go get something else. And with that feedback, I went and met with the chef who had actually heard the same thing from a different student and started formulating the plan that we're currently operating under. So we converted the 4 dining halls from this entree style, this culinary focused style, over to more comfort food. It's still quality food. We're still making most of it from scratch, but we have a kimchi's, which is our Asian Indo-Asia cuisine. So it's kind of like a boosted up Panda Express with an entree that can feature everything from India to Korea to American Chinese food. Then we have our Italian pasta bar. Pasta bar was one of the top requests from students when we were talking to them. And then we're featuring entrees from across the Mediterranean. So we're still doing some of the cool culinary stuff because we do have a percentage of the population that likes those things. And then we brought Tac back. That was the #1 request from day one. Tac is back, and we moved it over to Knollcrest because we can put more students through Knollcrest at a time, which helps move those lines. We know that Tac line is going to be our longest line, at least for a little bit. And then we've had homestyle in the past, but we brought it back and we combined that with the burger bar that we had in the past. Both Tac and homestyle also feature entrees that are a little more creative, maybe a little more out of their comfort zone, so they can get the comfort food and maybe get a few bites of something else and explore. And what we've seen since we've launched this on Monday is that the lines are balancing out. the students are making decisions. They'll see that the line is long at Talk, and they're still comfortable getting pasta. They're still comfortable going to the burger bar. And so that's one thing that's helped our lines move more quickly. Another side effect that we didn't plan on with this change is that typically when you add more options, because these buffets are more customizable, it slows things down because they're like, do I want this? Do I want that? But because the students recognize everything that's in front of them, it's actually moving more quickly through the lines. We're actually getting students through from the swipe and out the door in less than a minute's time. Now that doesn't help with the other challenge that we have. The academic schedule at Calvin is designed in a way to help the students stay structured and still have time for chapel and things like that. But that means a large percentage of them come at the dining halls at the exact same time. So even if we're doing a minute at a time, if you're that poor student at the end of the line, it's a wait. Our wait time in our longest lines at Talk, total time is between 20 and 25 minutes, which when the weather's nice, not a big deal. When it's kind of cold out like today or raining like it was on Tuesday, I think it was, that's a big deal. So we're trying to look at some other solutions that help students plan better. I'm looking at some technology solutions where basically, so as an example, like at Disneyland, you can download an app and it'll tell you how long the lines are to your favorite rides. We're looking at solutions like that where the students could log in and see even before they leave their dorm that Talk has a long line, but there's no wait at home style. The other thing is we're looking at the academic schedule to try and figure out how many students are coming at which time. And we're going to be providing some guidance to students saying, I know you're hungry and you want to eat right at 5 o'clock, but if you wait till 5:35, the lines are significantly shorter and you're not going to be out in the weather as long. And those are the kind of solutions we're looking at. We're trying to empower the students, give them the options that are comfortable with no matter which location they go to, and help them, manage their time to make sure that they're not standing out in the weather.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. You touched on a lot of the other questions I want to get to as well in that response. So I appreciate that. But just for those who might not be familiar, you're saying Talk, and I believe that's short for Taqueria. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay. That's our Mexican-American entrees. It's the burritos. I mean, they're the most popular thing on campus.
Oh, I know. I remember back when I was working on campus regularly and I would be going to the dining hall, that was often where I would stop as well because it's great. I felt like I had my own like Qdoba or Chipotle or something on campus, So
well, one of the other things that the feedback on from students is the students with allergies. We didn't have Zone initially when we first started, so we had Zone on the line, but students weren't recognizing. So Zone is our allergen neutral entree option. We moved it back to where Zone was located away from the line, and we saw zero participation there. And so part of our move now is each of the locations have it so you can customize your meal and work within your special dietary needs, which also includes the vegan and vegetarians. One of the reasons Talk is so popular is you can get a very large vegan burrito, go away, be very full and satisfied. And so each of the 4 locations have those solutions built into the menus so the students can customize not only to their taste, but also to their.
Yeah, that's great. So with the comfort food options that you have, how is it working for perhaps some international students who might not have the same ideas for comfort food that some of our American or Canadian students have?
Sure. So we're trying to incorporate in those special entrees some of those pieces. We've found over the years that creating food that is authentic to their countries is difficult because a lot of students, in fact, even American students, struggle with this isn't how my mom made it or my grandmother made it. So in years past, we've encouraged students to submit recipes. We've created, for instance, quite a few African dishes. And so the African dishes are still being featured. They're just being featured in different locations. And so the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern food, they're all part of those entree sets. And so we're doing that. It's funny, I was talking to a group of baseball players in our first few weeks, and one of the baseball players who said he didn't like pasta, which is, pasta is one of my favorite things, so that kind of floored me right there. And he said the food I don't like the food. And I said, well, I need a little more to go on. Like, what don't you like? And he said, it's not what my mom makes. And so that means there's a lot of good mom cooks out there, and that just raises the bar for us. But it's kind of the same way with international food. We tend to serve a lot of things that are Americanized. So we have a pretty significant South Korean population on campus. And one of the things that a lot of the Asian countries like is to be able to add a lot of toppings to their things. And so in our kimchi's, our Panda Express type solution, we have 8 selections of different toppings to put on top of the rice. Because one of the things that a lot of Asian students they'll just eat white rice and put some different toppings on it. And so we have those toppings available. And this week's been very busy, so I've been helping serve on the lines, and that's the line I've been put on most. And you'll see when our South Korean students come through, they tend to build their plate in a way that's different than our American students. We're used to just doing rice and just putting it all on top, and they're more used to having the rice on the side with the 3 or 4 different proteins and the toppings, and then they're basically taking bites and building each bite, which is a different style of eating. And this kind of speaks to that. So we're still looking for feedback from students. It's our first week, so if there's something that's missing, we'll just incorporate it in.
That's great. I'm sure you'll probably be hearing from some of them. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about options for commuter students. What can they do for getting their food right now?
Sure. So Johnny's is open. When we made the choice not to put talk out in the start because we were worried about the lines, everyone going to talk, we actually rebooted Johnny's, our main retail on campus, to Johnny's Tacos. So we took all the talk recipes and brought them downstairs, and it went pretty well. The business was about equal to what it was last year as far as cash and credit and dining dollars goes. But we got a lot of feedback that they missed the burgers and the chicken tenders and the French fries. And so part of this switch with bringing talk back is we're bringing those items back. So starting on Monday, we'll be back in Johnny's with more of the classic grill style food. We've upgraded some of the ingredients. It's a better quality than what it has been in past years. That was already in the plans before COVID, so we already had a lot of that built. So it was just getting our processes set out. So commuters are welcome to come to Johnny's. They're actually welcome as long as they're a registered student. They're welcome in the dining halls as well. For contact tracing purposes, we don't allow outside guests into the dining halls. We're also trying to limit exposure to our student population to keep them healthy. But as long as you're a student, staff, or faculty, you're welcome in the dining hall. So they can come and eat in the dining halls. And then with Campus Life's help, Student Life's help, we actually opened up a few more areas. This was another negotiating point with the health department where commuters can eat on campus. Whereas before they could come inside, but they weren't allowed to eat inside. They can now eat. The Johnny seating area is open up, 6 feet distance, so it's not as many tables as we'd want, but they can eat in Johnny's all day long. The Heckman Library Lounge on the 3rd floor. I get the library levels mixed up. I think it's on the 3rd floor. Also has from 11 to 1, you're allowed to eat in there. It's limited time because we have to sanitize differently. And then because the Prince Conference Center is being used for classroom space, we took the fireside. If you've been to the Prince Conference Center, it's the side with the dance floor, and we've turned that into another seating area, and we're cleaning that all day long, so commuters are welcome to go there. It also, that helps them with access for Wi-Fi and things like that for doing homework and joining their virtual classes.
Yeah, that's great. It's been amazing to watch the staff sort of adapt to all these changes that have to be made, and it's just a testament to their willingness to work and carry out the mission of the university. So thank you for all your work with us. You started talking a little bit about athletes in one of the earlier questions, and I know that some of the athletes were bringing up concerns about not getting enough food, and other students were bringing that up as well, especially when they have an unlimited plan. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. I think you realized it was maybe a different issue, or that was probably some of the stuff you were touching on a little bit with athletes. But are the students getting enough food now, and have you worked out some of those kinks?
Yeah, absolutely. The students, it's fun. The parents out there, I want to just give you a shout out. You did a good job raising polite and thankful children and students. When I've asked them, when I'm talking to them in the lines or when I'm serving, like, what do you want? They've all like, no, you're doing a good job. We understand this is hard. Thank you, thank you. And when I push and push, and finally they're like, well, we miss the burgers, we miss the nachos. And some of the students that complained, and they would speak in general terms, I've actually done video conferencing with them, like that hockey player. And, through talking through them and getting them past that politeness into the real meat of their concern, we did figure out that it was more so not the quantity of food that we're giving them, although I'm going to speak about that in just a moment. It wasn't food that they're comfortable with, and so they're gambling on what they're putting in their box. And so our motto on the line is fill the box. And so the boxes we have, they're 2.5 inches deep. In fact, since we went to the concepts, we even got rid of the little individual cups because we can get more into the box. And so when I was working the pasta bar earlier this week, I'm scooping pasta in there and I tell the student, you tell me when to stop. And so they have complete control of how much is going in there. And we're definitely going through more food now that it's food they're comfortable with. And we fill the box. So if they choose to have 3 breadsticks, they get 3 breadsticks. The only time we've been limiting students is when they're getting a little crazy. So Talk, as I said, is back. And we've had a few students trying to get 3 burritos, 4 burritos. We're limiting them to 2 burritos. Now, understanding that our burritos, if they get all the proteins and everything in there, they're between a 1/4 and a 1/2 pound burrito. Think the large burrito, Qdoba, that's what we're giving out. And so a couple of reasons: it takes time to make all that food and people are waiting in line. The other thing, and this is one of the concerns in the beginning of the semester, we're limiting a little bit on the protein side because we produce as much as possible as we go. We aren't cooking the whole meal ahead. And if just because the hockey player gave me the great feedback, I'll pick on the hockey team. If the hockey team came through and every one of those guys said, I want 5 of the protein of the ribs or the chicken breast, the people behind them would have to wait for us to cook more to keep up. But we've got our rhythm down now, and there's no issues with us running out of food. We haven't run out of food at all this week. And it's taking 2 hands for some of these athletes and just students in general to carry the box out. The other things we've added, salad bars are back in now. We're doing build to order salad bars, especially. That's great for those students. Actually, they want a lot of food, but healthier food. And then we've since day one, we've been offering 3 additional sides on top of that box. And so I haven't heard any students saying they're still not getting enough food, but if they do, then we'll just have to relook at things again.
That's great. Well, so you're getting a lot of good feedback from the students, it sounds like, directly. But I'm wondering how else we can empower our students to reach out with their concerns to you or to other creative dining staff rather than their parents.
Sure.
How can students reach you? How can they make their voices heard?
Yeah, that's great. We've been working very hard, and I've been working very hard to introduce myself to as many students as possible. And it's getting more and more so where they recognize me when I'm walking around, and they will stop me, which I really appreciate. I think one of the other great tools that students have here that I haven't experienced at other institutions is a very active student senate. The student senate is very concerned about the student experience and want to represent them. And I've met with student senate 3 times in the last 5 weeks on different issues that students have brought to them. So that's another great resource. We have our Calvin Dining at Creative Dining Services email. And I'd say it's about 1 or 2 emails a week now. It was a lot heavier in the beginning of the semester. So some students are emailing us through that. Our webpage has the whole contact us that everyone else has, and that goes to that same email. And I think that's probably how most students find their way to it. And, our checkers, so the people swiping them in, our service supervisors, they've been encouraged now that we've got our rhythm down with this new style to be out and talking to the students as much as possible and trying to gain that information. The more comfortable, especially our first year students, get with speaking up and representing themselves and advocating for themselves, the better we can be, because the whole plans that we came with startup, I'm the one who came up with the entrees from scratch and, culinary standards and we kind of made that in a void because we didn't have as much access to students during the summer. And, we just keep changing based on what they're providing us. So those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us. I actually had some students just show up at my office for the first time this week, which is great. I've been in college and university dining my entire time with creative dining services, I've had options to go to the business and industry world, but I don't, because I love interacting and being with the students. That's why I've been working in college university so long.
Yeah, Calvin students are pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
And we're glad to have you here too. I think we'll try to put those links down below in the comments. Perhaps we can put your contact page in there, and maybe your did you say it's Calvin Dining at Creative Dining?
Yeah, .com.
.com. Okay, so we can try to put that down in the comments below for people to find and pass on to the students if any of the parents hear any concerns, they can encourage them to reach out to you first. So I'm going to go to a question that came in from one of the parents here online. We also just got a comment that says, my daughter let me know that meals this week have been great. Thank you for making the changes. So
that's awesome.
Got another comment or a question from a parent here saying, is there a plan to open all the dining halls for full hours like they were fall semester 2019? Hearing that the wait is at least 45 minutes, which doesn't allow time to eat between classes, especially those in the evening. We're losing out on a lot of money this year due to the dining hall inconveniences. So can you talk a little bit about the hours?
Sure. So that is another change we made this week. We've extended the original plan for this fall, we adjust our hours based on the year's previous participation. And prior to COVID, we were actually going to close the commons for dinner because we saw all of our participation going to Knollcrest at night. We had very little to no participation, but we realized before opening this fall that there's no way we would be able to handle the volume and deal with the lines with having the commons closed. And so we opened commons for dinner. That was one of the changes we made going into this fall. And then starting this week, we are keeping commons open until 7 o'clock. Originally, we were only keeping it open until 6. So those are some of the adjustments we've made. The all-day dining is a problem for us. So as you've probably seen if you've gone to the grocery store or have experienced other retail type operations when you're out and about, it takes a lot more work to operate during COVID. Where, as an example, all of our buffets used to be self-service, so I had much less staff serving. We've almost tripled our staff for serving. And so it's a lot more expensive to operate under COVID, but we made a commitment to Calvin not to have to raise the cost to the students in order to still function this fall. Another expense that we wish we didn't have is the disposables, for instance. We didn't have disposables in the dining halls prior to this year. And so those expenses, we had to make adjustments to be able to operate using the resources we can. The other thing that limits all-day dining access is we have to have a certain amount of time for changing over the lines, and there's a higher level of sanitation than we had before. We've always gotten great cleaning scores from our inspections, but there's way more steps to cleaning now with COVID in effect. And I imagine those steps will probably continue forever. So as far as going back to all-day dining or open hours or grazing, those things are really based on when there is a vaccine available and the County Health Department or the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services changes the restrictions. So that's really the biggest challenge we have, is trying to work with within those two things. We have a certain amount of resources to work within, and then the rules that are put on us. And we're all very curious, as I think everyone else out there is what will normal look like when we get back to normal? Will we ever be able to do self-service buffets again? Conversation with my staff the other day, for instance, just like gloves are standard for us and have been for a long time in dining services, will masks become a new standard as far as the sanitation practice in dining services, even after COVID is beaten? So unfortunately, I can't really say when it's going to happen. I know that my team and myself can't wait to get back to doing that. But this are the restrictions we have to work within.
Yeah, well, I'm sure the parents will appreciate that at least the hour extension is better than than nothing at this point, and so we appreciate that you're working towards that. You started talking a little bit about disposable items in the dining hall. I know it's been a huge change this year, and some of the the students don't really like that, and they've been trying to be more sustainable in their own ways. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you're trying to be a little bit more sustainable given the new predicaments that we're in.
Sure. It's definitely been tough. When we can, we are trying to purchase eco-friendly stuff as much as possible. But in Michigan, and I think in the states, post-consumer recycling and composting, commercial composting have pretty much shut down. So although we're trying to make those good purchases and being conscientious about that, a lot of the stuff, or all the stuff, is going to landfill at this point, or to an incinerator, depending on where you're at in the country and how things are handled. But there are times where we've had to do styrofoam, and the reason we're doing styrofoam is because it's all that's available, because everybody had to switch to disposables. We have been having conversations with the health department, because initially they said it had to be disposables only. They wouldn't allow reusable containers because of the high contamination rate. But the virus has changed. I think it's, last I read, it's mutating on a every other week kind of basis, and so it's actually becoming a little bit easier to clean and take care of. It's not lasting on surfaces as long, and so we are currently researching maybe going to a green solution going into January. I've done the financials math, and that's fine, but there's other checks that I have to do with Kent County. So we're having those conversations. I know a couple of the universities that we operate here in Michigan have already won in their local health department those arguments, and they're testing it out. So I'm also honestly letting them guinea pig a little bit so they can figure out the process, because there's a lot of concerns about bringing contaminated goods back into the operation as far as exposing our staff. But the students have been amazing. They are opting not to take the plastic bags unless they absolutely have to. We did hand out reusable grocery bags to all the students. Some of them are using them. A lot of them forget them on a daily basis, but even when they forget them, they're not taking the plastic bags. They're just balancing everything and taking it back to their rooms. It'll be, I think, when things get colder and they have to start wearing gloves and stuff, they'll probably start using the bags more. And we've got a marketing campaign starting next week that'll remind students, those bags we sent you, that's what those are for. The other thing is that students are running with their own silverware. They're running with silverware. They're not running with silverware. Don't do that. They're bringing their own silverware with them and taking it back and washing them. And I've seen a lot of, really, from things you just bought off from Amazon to students who have actually sewn their own little pouches, and they're keeping their silverware in the pouch and they're bringing it with them. So they're turning down silverware. So the silverware packs that we give out. I think the other thing is when they're looking at those 3 items that they get to take with them, they're actually making conscious decisions about what they're taking based on some of the packaging as well. So I've never worked anywhere where the students were so conscious about the environment. I also met with the Students' Sustainability Council last week and talked to them about some of the challenges, and we're going to start partnering with them to try and figure out how we can do better. Another thing that we're doing is that this is actually a creative dining initiative that started 2 years ago, but we are trying to move our students away from protein being the center of the plate and focusing more on the vegetables. We'll still have proteins as part of the mix, but we aren't doing giant chicken breasts at every meal. We aren't doing steaks and things like big pieces of meat at every meal, because of course meat has a huge impact on our environment too. So that's something that we launched over a year ago, and it's there was a movement a few years ago called the Sneaky Chef movement, where we're sneaking vegetables into our kids' food. We did do some marketing about it last year, but we're just continuing with that program, and students are just eating naturally in that way. And so there's an impact there as well. We try and be careful with how we're menuing so that we're not just attacking the environment in that way as well.
Yeah, that's great. And it's good to see the students stepping up like that. I just want to read another comment from a parent here saying, "Thank you for all that you're doing. My daughter is really enjoying working in the dining hall, and she loves Thursday orange chicken." So I think you hear that a lot. But
yeah, we do. Yeah, we kept it on the menu, and we serve General Tso's as Thursday nights, big thing, and we serve General Tso's in all 4 locations, even though it doesn't match the menu style, because it is still the #1 popular thing. I appreciate the comments, and especially from the student employees. We are so dependent on them and their help, and I really appreciate all the work they do, because they're having to follow all the same restrictions our employees do, and it's not always comfortable, and there is extra work that has to be done, and there's extra steps that have to be taken, and they're doing it, and it's just so great to work with them.
Yeah, that's great. And you started talking a little bit about how some students are being more sensitive about what they're eating just based on environmental concerns and the reasons you're serving less meat and that type of thing. I'm wondering what else you're doing to work with students who have dietary restrictions.
Sure. So we redesigned and launched our webpage to better define and help students understand what special dietary needs are and how we accommodate them. As I mentioned earlier, our lines are designed in a way that a student can eat within most special dietary needs. But if they have special dietary needs that go beyond a service like that, where they need to have something made specific for them, we do offer that. We have a form that students can fill out, and they can opt for us either to contact them and not contact us. It's good either way that they fill it out, because it helps us understand where the population has needs, and we actually adjust our menus to be able to meet the larger audience, because it's easier for us, of course, if we're meeting the larger special dietary needs, but it makes it easier on the students. They don't have to ask for special accommodations. But as an example, at Chow, the Italian concept, we have gluten-free pasta available all the time, and we have a process that we train all of our line servers on that they have to follow before they go and get that pasta. They have to change their glove. They have to take their gloves off, wash their hands, fresh gloves. It's a clean, separate container away from all the rest of everything else, because with allergens, depending on your sensitivity, the smallest amount can cause a trigger. But with celiac disease, we've continued to see an increase on our campuses across the company. The tiniest amount of contamination for some of those people can make them very sick. So we take that, we're very conscious about that. And we do have some students prior to this switch that they would actually come to the kitchen and we would make their food for them to make sure that they have a safe eating environment. And then we're currently working on a marketing campaign that'll teach students how to eat within each of those special dietary needs at each of the 4 stations. Although we have labeling up on the menus and it explains what's in everything, we label what it includes, what ingredients are included. This is another way where it basically gives a vegan or a vegetarian or a student that has a dairy sensitivity a way to hack the menu and be able to eat in all 4 of those locations along with our retail.
Thanks, that's great. I have one other just a comment from a parent here saying, following a parent council meeting, this parent was able to explain to her daughter and her friends that the constraints that you and your staff are faced regarding the constant interaction that we have with the King County Health Department and the added sanitation requirements that you have to meet. This really helped them have a better appreciation for the long lines and what you're doing to keep students safe. So thanks for that. Yeah. And I've got time for just one more question here, so I'll just end with this one. I'm just wondering about those students who have to go into isolation and how are their dietary needs being met during that time?
Sure. So part of the process when they're put into isolation, Calvin informs them of how we manage our delivery, and I'll talk about that in a second. But also they're provided with the link to that special dietary needs form, and that comes directly to us. And so if we are delivering to them, we're delivering food that is safe for them to eat. And there's been a couple of times where we've delivered something and the student didn't fill out the form or didn't realize that the form was there, and we just delivered another meal. And then we got them in the system when we knew what they could and couldn't eat. And so we're building the food that we deliver, the hot food that we're delivering is built off from the menus in Knollcrest. And so if they have a special dietary need, we can hack the menu like we're encouraging students to, and build those in a safe way that those students can still have access to it. And so what we're delivering to the students is the exact same food that the students who aren't stuck in isolation have access to. It comes with the additional sides, it comes with a bottle of water. And there's been a couple of times where, when our numbers are a little bit higher, we've thrown some extra treats in there, and recognizing the students in the inconvenience for some, and then for some, the fact that they don't feel well, we're trying to take care of them. And for the most part, actually, I haven't heard of any complaints or concerns from students, and we really haven't had any students asking for anything specific based on how they're feeling. We try and make sure when we're building it off from those lines that we're building food that is, I guess neutral is the word I'll use, that isn't going to be too rough on the stomach or that would make your throat, like spicy food, if your throat hurts because of your symptoms, it's going to, trigger coughing and things like that. So we're trying to be as conscious about that as possible. And then we deliver every day lunch and dinner to those students.
I know I said that was the last question, but it reminded me that when you're talking about the forms that they had to fill out, is that something they can do through the Eatable app too, or no?
No, so the Eatable app doesn't have that capability, although the Eatable app does have the ability to provide us with feedback. It is linked to that same email. So if a student has the Eatable app downloaded, they can see what menus we're serving. They can do mobile ordering through Johnny's and Peet's, and they can also do that feedback right from their phone. Another thing that we did to try and add value, speaking of Peet's, is that last year when we launched Peet's, we limited the amount of dining dollars that students could use at Peet's because we really want to make sure the brunt of their dining dollars is for meal supplements. But we're seeing, because the students are pretty much going through the dining halls on a regular basis, that they aren't going through their dining dollars as quickly as we would have hoped. We want to make sure they're getting their value out of their meal plan. So starting on Tuesday this week, we took the leash off from dining dollars. I'm sorry, Calvin, they're called Knights Bucks, the Knights Bucks. And so students can use all their night bucks at Peet's. I don't encourage them to use it all on caffeine, but they're adults. They need to make those choices. And we've seen our participation at Peet's double based on that. So hopefully, especially now as the weather is getting colder, they can get something warm to warm them up. So yeah.
All right. Well, great. We got another comment here saying, thank you for all your hard work. So it is hard. So thank you, Scott. Thanks for joining us today and for explaining some of the challenges that you're facing about dealing with food service during a pandemic. It's amazing the work that you and your staff are doing, and we're just grateful for the way that you care and listen to the students. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on today, and it's our privilege to be able to serve the Calvin community. We really love it here.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. We'll be back probably in the next couple of weeks with another Calvin Chat, so make sure you watch this Facebook page for announcements of when that will be taking place. Have a great weekend.